In the previous lectures on labeling theory, we covered some of the policy implications. One of those policy implications was due process. Now, Sherman's theory of defiance expands on the importance of due process. Specifically, he describes how the state intervention, the label, can have less of an impact on subsequent offending if due process is afforded to the individual. So, just to recap, Tenenbaum and Lemert both describe how once an individual is labeled and accepts the label, they will continue that behavior. Sherman's defiance theory, however, explains that that's not always the case. And it's not always the case because the life of that offender and that offender's interaction with the criminal justice system can affect the impact of that label. So Sherman describes how when an offender is not treated with respect or dignity, when an offender perceives a sanction as unfair or as undeserved, and the offender lacks bonds, that offender is more likely to deny the shaming of the label and defy the system by continuing to offend. So state intervention, according to Sherman, via arrest and punishment can increase crime or decrease crime. But it will only decrease crime if the offender was treated with respect and dignity, if the sanction was perceived as fair, deserved, and if the offender had bonds. Now, the perception of fairness depends on the behavior of criminal justice professionals. This is both among police and in the corrections system. Those individuals with the lowest opinion of the police are much more likely to recidivate. They're also much more likely to be arrested. They are more subject to police-initiated encounters, meaning they're not calling 911. The police are often stopping them. Police officers are rarely interacting with an individual for a good reason. Either the individual was a victim or the individual is a potential offender. So it's likely that that individual, the offender or the victim, is not going to be incredibly kind and calm during the interaction with the officer. So the officer then should always remain calm and be respectful and treat the individual with dignity, because they already know that that interaction is going to be negative. A sanction is perceived fair or deserved when there is procedural fairness. For example, if there was a fair hearing, if they feel their lawyer actually listened to them, and if the law was fairly enforced, meaning they received a punishment and so did another person engaged in the crime. When an individual perceives all of those as negative, they're much more likely to be defiant. Bonds, however, are the most important. And you should know this by now, right? It's informal social control. So which theories talked about bonds? Laubman-Sampson's theory, Giordano, Cernkovich, and Rudolph's theory, and obviously Hershey's theory. So bonds will determine if that individual is deterred or if that individual perceives the sanction as unfair. So I hope this is clear. So here's a definition of defiance. Defiance, and this is in your textbook on page 279. Defiance is the net increase in prevalence, incidence, or seriousness of future offending caused by a proud, shameless reaction to the administration of a criminal sanction. Defiance can be specific, meaning an individual is reacting to his or her own experience with the system, or it could be a general defiance, meaning the individual is reacting to an individual in a group's experience or an entire group's experience. So you could see then how some of the police shootings could cause defiance among a community. Defiance can be direct, such as an attack on the sanctioning agent, so an attack on the police officer, or indirect, meaning displacing their anger onto targets that represent that agent. So here you can see also how we can explain rioting. So they're not exactly attacking the police officers, but they're attacking the community. Those who are alienated are more likely to react with fury and resentment, right? So those who already either lack bonds or do not have many social attachments are much more likely to be defiant. So the implications of this are procedural justice. Procedural justice has 4 characteristics. Voice, meaning the defendant believes that his or her side of the story is being heard. Or, for example, law enforcement explains to the individual why the individual is being detained or why the individual is being stopped and frisked or pulled over. The next has to do with neutrality. This is when the individual, the next element of procedural justice is neutrality. And this occurs when the criminal justice system does not hold any bias against the individual. Law enforcement can practice neutrality by being in control of their emotions. So they don't react more harshly towards a suspect because the suspect is verbally disrespecting the officer. Instead, the officer remains calm and recognizes that this is a difficult situation for the individual. The third characteristic of procedural justice is respect. Law enforcement can show respect by not swearing, by maintaining direct eye contact with the individual, so the removal of sunglasses, for example. Courts can show respect by providing professional clothing when an individual is going before the court. And the last characteristic of procedural justice is transparency. This occurs when the individual understands the criminal justice process, and so law enforcement can practice transparency by informing the suspect of why they are detained, why they're being arrested. The court can do so as well by informing the defendant of the criminal charges and the potential consequences of those charges. The goal here is to ensure that the offender is treated with respect and dignity, that the sanction is perceived as fair, that the sanction is perceived as deserved. In your discussion board, you have questions related to procedural justice, but specifically Oakland Police Department is implementing procedural justice, and I'm looking forward to reviewing your thoughts and comments on that NPR clip.